right. Good morning. It's Bernard Nomberg, another episode of NOMBERG LAW Live. We want to thank you guys for joining us. I have attorney Nancy Cavey. Good morning, Nancy. How are you?
Good morning.
And are you calling me, are you in your Seminole or St. Petersburg office?
I'm in my St. Petersburg office.
Excellent, excellent. Well, I appreciate you spending some time with us. We are going to be talking about an area that you and I both handle, Social Security Disability, SSI, and all of those related good subjects that come with it. And I appreciate you having some time for me this morning.
My pleasure.
Absolutely. I need to push this. I hope Christy is sharing it to all of your social media, but I'm about to do it to my other, and then we can get started.
Excellent.
If she needs some help doing that, she just needs to holler at us. Guys, this morning, Nancy and I are going to talk about Social Security Disability, Social Security, and all of the programs that they offer. The Social Security Administration is a very important and huge federal entity that so many people rely upon, but it can be a scary process. It can be something that is daunting when you get started. How do you get started? Am I eligible? There's 1,000 questions that we're not going to be able to answer all of them, but hopefully over the next 20, 30 minutes, Nancy and I will kind of take you through some of the basics, at least to get you started. Nancy, tell the folks who are watching us live or maybe watching us later on a little bit about yourself and your practice.
Well, my dad worked at a family insurance brokerage business in Baltimore, Maryland, and he purchased a short and long-term disability policy with the hopes he'd never have to use it and that he'd never have to stop working because he was a proud World War II Navy Air Corps vet. But unfortunately, he was diagnosed with having leukemia when I was in junior high school, and I watched him struggle till the day I graduated from high school with the decision to stop working. And it was a difficult and it was a painful decision for a proud man to admit that he could no longer work. So I bring the perspective of someone who's been inside the family of a disabled breadwinner, who's had to make that difficult decision to stop working, face that daunting Social Security disability and long-term disability insurance claims process. So that's what motivates me. That's what gives me my passion every day, is because I've been there and I understand how scary it is for clients to make this decision and deal with the Social Security Administration.
And so you went on to law school and you've been practicing in this area for quite a while. I know you from social media, and we just met in person or virtually for the first time, but I know that you have a very varied and wide practice. Tell us a little bit more about your practice.
Well, I also represent folks who have short and long-term disability insurance policies through their employer or on their own, and it's a nationwide practice. So in addition to practicing Social Security law here in the state of Florida, I fly all over the United States helping folks who have ERISA disability insurance claims.
And for those of you watching us live or those of you watching us later on, please put in the comments section any comments or questions that you've got for Nancy or for me. We'll try to get to them as we're live. I also am hoping that your office will put all of your contact information, Nancy, in the comments section so folks can reach out to your office.
I look forward to hearing from anybody who has any questions.
Let's start pretty broad. Let's start with, there are really two main areas that I want to go into today that deal with or from the Social Security Administration. One is commonly known as SSDI. The other is known as SSI. So let's start with SSDI. Tell us what it is and just give us a brief overview, and we'll get into some of the specifics in a little bit.
All right, look at your paycheck. You'll see those Fica withholdings. That's important because for Social Security disability insurance, that deduction is a form of an insurance payment or premium payment. You become insured by working so many quarters. The general rule is 20 out of 40 quarters, but it depends on your age. So it's an insured program. Many times people will say to me, look, I don't want anything that I didn't earn. And I say to them, you earned it because there were deductions taken from your paycheck. and you've earned that. So don't be ashamed to apply for your Social Security disability benefits because you paid for it.
And just as a brief overview, let's switch over to SSI. What is SSI?
SSI is Supplemental Security Income Insurance or Benefits. It's not an insurance program. So let's say, for example, you have lost your insured status because you've been out of work for a long time, or you never really participated in the national economy because you were a mom, let's say, and you worked a little bit, but you didn't work a lot, but you've now become disabled. If you haven't gotten the insured status under control, you're eligible for SSI, but it's an asset-based test, so you have to have limited assets. The test of being disabled is the same. It's just one is insured, SSDI, and one isn't, SSI. So that's the primary difference between the two.
And I'm not going to flip back and forth, but I want to spend more of our time talking about the SSDI program and how a person can qualify. But even before that, let's say that someone comes or calls your office and says, I've been working, but I got injured on the job about a year and a half ago, and I have a work comp claim, and I'm about to resolve it, but it's been suggested to me by my doctor or by my work comp lawyer that I should consider filing for SSDI. What do you, Nancy, what do you think is the best first steps of getting into that, just to see whether or not a person would qualify? What should the person do?
Well, I think the primary thing that someone needs to understand is that a workers' comp case is different than a Social Security case, that is different than a short or long-term disability case, that's different from a personal injury case. What I mean by that is you have to have a proof of different things. And I do represent people who've been injured on the job. And so I have to explain to them, look, in the workers' comp case, this is what we've got to prove. But in the Social Security case, this is what we've got to prove. So one of the first things I do with my clients is to explain the 5-step sequential evaluation that's used in every Social Security case. Because if you don't understand this, you're lost. Many times people will come to my office and say, well, my neighbor who doesn't look like they're disabled just got their benefits. Why am I not getting my benefits? And I say to them, look, 5 steps. And the first step is you have to be out of work for at least a year or have a medical condition that would keep you out of work for at least a year. The second element is you have to have a severe problem, just not a strain or a sprain. The third thing you have to prove is that you potentially meet what's called a medical listing. Now, you and I studied biology in school, and we know that there's the body system, there's the cardiovascular system, the digestive system. Well, the Social Security Administration at step 3 looks at your medical records and uses a systems-based approach. So let's say, for example, you've got a herniated disc in your back as a result of your work comp accident. The question is whether your medical records establish that you meet all of the elements of that listing. As you and I know, there's the orthopedic listing in Chapter 11. And if you don't meet every one of those elements, you don't meet a listing at step 3. Doctors didn't go to medical school to learn how to write a report that says, well, you met that item, that item, that item. Bingo, you met a listing. Where these cases are really won and lost are steps 4 and 5. And as I explain to my clients, it's on the one hand a medical issue, and on the other hand a vocational issue. Medically, you want your doctor to complete something called a residual functional capacity form. That'll explain how long you can sit, stand, walk, stoop, bend, all those sorts of things. The Social Security Administration won't tell you about that kind of form, but an experienced Social Security attorney like you knows that we've got to pick the right form for the doctor to fill out. Because ultimately, from a vocational standpoint at step 4, the issue is, can you go back to the lightest physically demanding job or the simplest job you held in the 15 years before you became disabled? And if the answer to that is yes, then we get to move on to the 5th question, which is there any other work in the mythical, not real world, national economy in view of your age, your education, the skills that you learned from your other work, and your restrictions and limitations. So from the very beginning, I want my client to understand those 5 steps and the fact that we're a team. We're a team with the doctor, we're a team with the Social Security Administration, and we're a team together as a client and an attorney, because we've got to tell a story. We've got to tell a story that explains what the client's symptoms are and how those symptoms impact their ability to function. And if there are two words my clients end up hating at the end of their case is symptoms and functionality, because that's all I'm harping on. We need to tell your story in the way that the judge or the Social Security Administration will understand it. What are your symptoms and how do they impact your ability to function? So now your clients know all about the 5-step sequential evaluation.
And thank you for that, Nancy. It's extremely helpful. At what stage of the process do you advise potential clients or current clients that your office get involved when they're applying for Social Security disability?
I think that's a very important question, because I know that there are some lawyers who will not take a case unless the person has applied and been denied. That's not my philosophy. I think we're a team from the very beginning. When the doctor says you can't work anymore, or you think you can't work anymore, it's time to be, at least in my office, because I want to be looking at your medical records. I want to hear your story. And I may say to you, not time to apply, we need to improve your medical records, or it's time to apply. Because, as you know, the Social Security disability claims process can take 6 months to 2 years or more. I'd rather get it right from the very beginning, so I'd rather get the client's medical records. I'd rather work with them in developing a great work history, and I'd rather get that residual functional capacity form so that when I'm submitting that initial application, it's a shock and awe application that goes into the Social Security Administration. So my answer is from the very beginning.
And oftentimes my Social Security clients have already been my workers' comp clients. So we already have all the medicals. Typically, there'll be a functional capacities evaluation in the work comp case that's been done, within the previous 6 months to a year that the doctor has reviewed and signed off on. So we'll oftentimes use that as part of our initial filing.
And that's great. I think that if a Social Security applicant can find a lawyer who does workers' comp, Social Security, short and long-term disability, that's the best thing that they can do, because you really have a one-stop lawyer, if you will, who understands how these cases have to be proven, but how they also interact, as opposed to this piecemeal business that I see too often. And I've got to sort of act as the shepherd, if you will, to gather all the information, organize everything, and submit it, and keep everybody's ball up in the air, if you will.
That's right. Well, we'll get back to the Social Security disability process in a minute. We do have a question from Christy. If an individual has a short or long-term disability policy, is there any interaction between their policy and Social Security disability benefits?
Well, that's a great question, because most of the time a disability insurance policy will require that the applicant apply for Social Security disability benefits. Why? Well, it's pretty simple. The disability insurance company wants to reduce the amount of the short or long-term disability benefits by whatever you get or the dependents get in the Social Security benefits. So if you don't apply, the short or long-term disability carrier says, you're getting the benefits, and we're reducing your short or long-term disability benefits by what you would have gotten in Social Security. Now, you and I both know many times people who become disabled lose their group insurance, and I think we don't want to lose sight of the fact that Social Security benefits not only provide money benefits, but they provide medical benefits. And so, to me, even though there's a reduction in the amount of the short or long-term disability benefits, the benefit of having ultimately medical care under the auspices of Medicare or Medicaid is just as important as getting those money benefits.
And thank you for that. Let's go back to the Social Security disability process. You and I both know there are different levels to the process. So I want to just talk about, first of all, what's the first step or first level called? Who from the administration is dealing with the applicant? And then let's just briefly go through the other levels.
Okay. The initial application, quite frankly, is a pain in the rear end, and you know it. It's
that's a kind description.
Well, I'm going to get a little more graphic a little later, but the point I'm trying to make is it's a difficult form to fill out. It asks questions about your medical treatment, who you've seen, when you saw them, what happened. It asks about your work history. And you and I know that you can make or break your Social Security case with the work history form. And we here spend a lot of time with our clients thinking backwards. What do I mean by that? Many times my clients will come in and say, well, I was a bricklayer, or I ran a machine, or I was a telemarketer. And I say, well, tell me why you can't do that. What are the job duties you can't do? Many times people will make mistakes in that initial application because they're not thinking about what they can't do as they're filling out that work history form. And of course, the way I do it is when I submit that initial application, I submit it with that residual functional capacity form that's applicable to my client's medical conditions. That initial application goes to a state agency. The Social Security Administration is contracted with a state agency in every state called Disability Determination Services, DDS. Do you know what my nickname for them is?
I can't guess.
All right. Now you're going to learn something that you can use with your clients. Dumb, dumber, and stupid. DDS, if you give them an opportunity to think, they're going to default to saying that the applicant can do at least light duty work. And you and I know that if somebody can generally do light duty work, their Social Security claim is going to get denied. So when I send my shock and awe initial application in, I don't want them to think. I want them to look at that residual functional capacity form and know that my client can't do sedentary work. Now, you and I both know that about 2/3 of the time the claims get denied at this initial application stage. So we get 60 days in which to file something called a request for reconsideration. It's not as much of a pain to fill out that form, but what's important is that new information, any new tests, that sort of stuff. But it goes back to dumb, dumber, and stupid, DDS, who hasn't necessarily gotten any smarter. So again, I want to give it to them in a package. I don't want them to think. 2/3 of the time cases are denied at that stage, and if we have to go to the request for hearing stage, then we ask for a hearing, but that can take 16 months, 24 months or more, depending on where you live. You and I know that we don't have control over these decisions, but I try to always give them enough information to make the right decision. There's a hearing process, and the hearing process is a bit of a lottery draw. You get a judge, and you may not like the judge you get. We're doing a lot of video conferencing, which I don't like. But you've only got basically 30 to 45 minutes maybe to put on your case. And all the judge wants to hear is what are your symptoms and how do those symptoms impact your ability to function before they turn to that vocational evaluator. That's the only other person generally who's in that hearing. And the question's going to be based on a hypothetical, can you go back to your past work? Or is there other work in the mythical, not real world national economy that you can do in view of your age, education, and skills? And that's really, really, I think, important for the applicant to understand, because if you have to go to trial, you've got to present your testimony in a way that the judge understands it. You have got to express that testimony in terms of symptoms and functionality, and you got to be ready to cross-examine a vocational evaluator. And if you've never done any of that, then, as Abraham Lincoln once said, you got a fool for a client. So those are the 3 stages. That's generally how it works. And I think it's important that clients understand that when they walk in the door, that this, again, is a team approach. This is a process. We work together. And I'm only as good as you are in the information that you give me.
So, and thank you for taking us through that. But let's say you go to the hearing stage. You've lost on the initial stage of doing your application. You appeal the decision. You've decided to have the hearing. You ask for the hearing. You go to the hearing. Then you get another unfavorable decision. What's next typically after the hearing stage? What are your options at that point?
Well, there really are 2 options, as you well know. And part of that's going to be influenced by what's called the date last insured. In other words, if your insured status has ended, you may have fewer options. But the general options are to say, I'm going to take an appeal to the Appeals Council in Virginia, where you argue, or a lawyer argues, that the judge has made a mistake. Not not a factual mistake generally, but normally it's a vocational mistake, maybe it's a medical mistake, and you're asking the court to send it back to the judge. That whole process takes a year. Generally, no new evidence can be submitted, and the reversal rate is probably about 25%. The alternative is to start all over again and file a new application. The huge problem with that is you may have lost your insured status, and the bigger problem also is when you start all over, you're giving up your rights to the benefits that you were claiming through the date of the decision. So it can be a financial hit. It's a difficult decision, but it's one I think you definitely have to make in consultation with your lawyer. I know a lot of lawyers won't take cases that have been lost because, quite frankly, who wants to clean up somebody else's mess? So I really, again, think that you're better off hiring a lawyer from the beginning. We can't guarantee a result, but I know lawyers like you and I will guarantee that we will do our darndest to win. And if we don't win, we won't give up until we have exhausted all of our remedies.
Thank you for that. For those of you just joining us live or watching later on, I'm speaking with Florida attorney Nancy Cavey. Nancy is based in the St. Petersburg, Seminole area. She specializes in Social Security disability, long-term, short-term disability claims, being hurt on the job, and I hope I haven't left out anything, Nancy. We'll put Nancy's contact information in the comments section if you have questions or concerns or want to speak with Nancy about possible representation. Please do so. And if you have any questions while we're going through this, please put them in the comments section. Nancy, I know that you have put together several publications to help out your clients, and I'd like for you to share a little bit of that if you don't mind.
Well, thank you. One of the books I've written is Your Rights to Social Security Disability Benefits. And I explain to my prospective clients the 5-step sequential evaluation and the claims process that we just talked about, because I think that people need to know what they're getting themselves into before they consider stop working and apply for benefits. So it's a great resource. I think education is really key. People need to understand what their options are. I've also written 2 short and long-term disability books that I again give to prospective clients. This is one of them, and it explains the short and long-term disability terms of a policy that you don't want to see, and explains how this interaction works with the Social Security claim. And then for folks who are professionals, I've written a very large book about short and long-term disability benefits and what they need to know about their short and long-term disability benefits and how I can work together either with them or their Social Security lawyer or their personal injury lawyer or their workers' comp lawyer to help them maximize their benefits, because there's all sorts of interaction between all of these benefits.
Oh, such great resources. Thank you for writing those. Thank you for sharing those. And I see that your staff has put in the comment section your contact information, so anybody watching this can reach out to your firm and to you to learn what they need to learn. Nancy, we're getting close toward the end of the interview and our discussion, and I've learned so much just in our 20-odd minutes here. I know you and I could talk for hours. This is what we do. And I know that the people who are watching this or will watch it later on, there's so much information to take. It's like drinking from a fire hose. It's just not feasible to learn it all at one time. And you hit on a key thing just a minute ago that I heard you say, that information and knowledge is so important. And I've been saying that for years. The more that I can inform my clients and give them the information they need, hopefully that reduces some of their stress. And hopefully knowledge and information is just so important, and having the right source, the right area to go to, really, I think, helps take away some of the guessing. It takes away some of that stress.
It absolutely does. And lawyers like us, I think, pride ourselves on educating our clients so that there is that peace of mind, that they know that we know what we're doing. They have a resource that will be there for them to answer their questions and to answer the questions that their family members might have. Because again, I know, having come from a family where my dad became disabled, that impacts the entire family, and I want everyone in the family to have a sense of well-being. They understand the process. They understand what we need to prove. They may be frustrated with the process, but they know that we know, and they know that we're a team working together. So I applaud lawyers like yourself who are dedicated to educating their clients and providing them with that peace of mind.
You know, there's probably nothing worse for an injured person who is not only has an on-the-job injury claim and a pending Social Security matter. It's 11:30 at night. They're laying in bed. They don't have the answers that they need. It becomes a source of frustration amongst the family members, maybe with a spouse, children at home, whoever it is. But just having an area, a place to go, YouTube, a website, a phone number, just having those things available seems to make a lot of difference for my clients, and I suspect for yours as well. Is that your experience?
It absolutely is. Knowing that you're not alone, knowing that there is a lawyer who understands what you're going through, who's approachable as you are, I think gives people a peace of mind and a resource that they know they're not alone. And this is a difficult journey. There's no doubt about it. It's the change between who you are or who you were to what you're going to be. That's scary. You don't know, you're not going to do the things that you loved before. You can't provide for your family. You've got this medical treatment. You're in pain. And the question becomes in your mind, how do I get from where I'm at to the best I can do for my family given my circumstances? So to have resources like you, like myself, I think are invaluable to everyone. And it doesn't matter if you're not in Alabama or you're not in Florida. I think we provide a sense of education and peace of mind that serves every American who finds themselves in this difficult situation.
Nancy, in closing, I want to hear your advice or what your thoughts are. If I'm someone who's home and I have not contacted an attorney, but I've got a situation where I don't think I'm going to be able to work over the next year. I haven't worked for the last 6 months. My doctors are telling me I'm close to reaching maximum improvement. Why would that person who's at home need to contact a lawyer who's experienced in Social Security matters?
Social Security disability benefits and medical benefits are one of the most valuable things that we have here in the United States by virtue of our Social Security disability system. It's a complex system. It's not easy to understand. Not all of the judges are motivated to provide and award Social Security disability benefits. It's like that old Holiday Inn commercial. You don't become an expert just because you stay there. Just because you read something on the internet doesn't make you an expert. You and I are lawyers. If I buy a piece of real estate, I get a real estate lawyer. If I need a will, I go get a lawyer who specializes in wills. I know that I need an expert to help me regardless of what it is. Just because I'm a lawyer doesn't mean I know everything that needs to be known about everything. So I think that you owe it to yourself. You owe it to your family to get your questions answered, to be able to formulate a path forward. You and I both know there's an organization called NOSCR, National Organization of Social Security Claims Representatives, NOSSCCR, and they have a resource of lawyers all across the United States that can provide Social Security information and representation to applicants. And go on the site. I think you should select from the sustaining members, who are the more senior members of the group, and call their office. And if you're not happy, call another one until you find someone you feel comfortable with. Because again, this can be a long-term relationship of a couple years. So you want to be comfortable with working with that firm, confident in their abilities, and confident that they have your and your family's best interests at heart.
Nancy, I can't thank you enough. That's just such valuable information. Side note, former client of mine found out about that organization, and he wanted to know if it was actually NASCAR, the way you pronounce it. So we had a long discussion about that, but I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. He was from Talladega, so I had to cut him a little slack.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like a real long ride in a big circle when you're in the Social Security Disability claims process, but I like that. I'll remember that.
Well, Nancy, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and your wisdom and your experience about all of this. This was a great discussion today. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, and thank you for taking the time to do this program and to educate your clients and prospective clients about the wonderful world of Social Security. Thank you.
Guys, this will conclude another weekly episode of NOMBERG Law Live. I've been talking with Florida attorney Nancy Cavey. She's an expert in so many areas, particularly Social Security, long-term, short-term disability, injuries on the job. Her contact information is in the comment section. Please reach out to her if you're in her part of the state. And guys, this will conclude us for today, and we'll catch you again next Tuesday on NOMBERG Law Live. Take care.
Thank you.